Hey everyone, this is Ivan with Limitless Trading Group. Today's topic is going to be volume versus warrants for this particular stock, OTLK Outlook Therapeutics. I'm going to get started by going into the filings, the most important part of it. So the first thing that I check for is total shares outstanding, and that will be the current date. So this was the current shares outstanding 22 million. Um, it- there is another part that I look into after this. I'll look into if they did have a reverse stock split, which it affects the shares outstanding. But for this particular video, I'm not going to show you guys. Just know that this was it was the most current shares outstanding. So it's not that much of a small float. So 22 million shares, and on this date right here, they had an offering. So if you scroll down here, I already have it highlighted. You guys can read through the whole thing. But this is the most important part for me that I look for. So on April 12, 2019, they did an offering of 10.3 million shares. Also some warrants as well, the same amount, and the warrants were exercisable for $2.90. Now, I highlighted the date right here when they did the offering, so it was trading around $1.50, roughly around that area. It started declining for a couple of days, and then around this area, they had some good news, pushed it, and then it had a second run. So I've noticed that a lot of people were shorting this on the first day because they said, well, this news is not that strong. But what's driving this, right? Why is volume so high? And I think for this particular stock, you really have to know your opponent and where's all the demand coming from? Well, like, where are all the people? Why are people so bullish on this particular stock? And a lot of times, whenever I see the filings have a specific price target, people are really starting to catch on to these filings, and they know that they are not going to dilute anytime soon until it hits that price target, because they do want to get out of their position with profit. And as long as the stock is trading under $2.90, it remains locked until the expiration date. So for this particular ticker, I was telling people not to short it, but I was not mentioning the warrants. The reason why is because I want people to have a learning experience, not just tell people what's happening in this move. Um, it all comes down to that. I mean, I didn't really have anyone when I first started trading, guiding me on what to do, and I'm definitely not that type of person. I don't like to guide people into trades or anything like that. It's more so of a learning experience. So the first day I did not trade this, not even long or short. Second day did not touch it as well. Third day, that's when it really started getting interesting for me, not only because of that, because of the warrants, but because it also filled the gap on the daily right here. You guys can see, and I'm going to go to the intraday. Okay, um, the intraday on the 20th. So let me go all the way back. I did wait a couple of days before I did this video because I wanted to make sure that this company was completely done diluting um, before I made this, like the total outcome of this move. So finally, the third day that it ran, keep in mind this is the third green day, right? And finally, the warrants are unlocked. It hits the $2.90 area, which this is the line right here. It actually hits $3 to the penny. And I was mentioning in the chat room that on level 2 there was some unusual activity when it finally crossed the $2.90 area. So what do I mean by that is you're going to start seeing the level 2 shift. You should, because now that the supply, the overhead supply has been unlocked, which is over 10 million shares, they're going to start dumping their shares, right? They're able to dump their shares for cash, and they're not going to miss that. So once it broke through that $2.90 area, I was interested. I had an order at $3 exactly, did not get filled, unfortunately. There was a huge seller, about 300,000 shares. So not even that person got filled on that area. They started getting partial fills, so I took a position at $2.92, thinking, well, you know what? That's an extreme overhead, right? Because shares outstanding is 22 million. The overhead supply is 10 million, so it's half of the shares outstanding. That's pretty big. And I was thinking, you know what, this thing, it's going to pull back, but I don't think it's going to pull back that much just because it's a cheaper price ticker. I really don't like. This isn't the best setup for me. I would like to have that much overhead on a stock that's over $5. Then you get a really nice move because then the spreads start getting larger as it falls down, and then it creates a volatility halt to a downside. That's where the real money comes in for me. But this price of a ticker, I'm not really too fond of. Um, so for this one, it started pulling back, and I was in pretty heavy. But when I started noticing it, spiking up, I started just covering on this. I really didn't like it. I thought we were gonna have a really nice flush, at least to the $2 area. And when it failed to break down, I noticed the volume that was coming in, so I just basically unloaded all my shares. I took a little bit of profit, and that was it. Um, it spiked again. I shorted it. But one thing to notice, and that was my second short, and then after that, I really didn't short it, right? I didn't short it until this date, uh, the following day. But one thing to notice when it comes to such overhead supply is that as soon as it hits their price target, which is $2.90 from this, as soon as it hits this, you have to calculate from here on out how long does it take to um, to have at least 10 million in volume, because you know that the overhead is a little bit over 10 million, and if it does 10 million within 30 minutes of market open, then most likely all those warrants are basically gone, right? Volume basically took over that, and it completely destroyed all those warrants. It ate through all those warrants. So one thing that I like to do is I like to write down as soon as it hits this area, from here on out, I calculate roughly when it hits 10 million in volume from here to whatever area. And once it hits that 10 million in volume, I'm not gonna touch it. It's completely overcrowded. People are not worried about that. Either they're not worried about the warrants, or they just completely don't know about the warrants. Not many people know about filings and how to look for particular things. So I really don't blame them. And when it started holding this level right here, I just completely stopped looking at it. Because I didn't want to FOMO. I didn't want to short into strength and then get squeezed. So I just completely stopped looking at it. As you can see, when it held this level right here, it came up, it started picking up in volume, and then squeezed a lot of people, and quickly got sold into. So it was a um, very choppy chart. And sure enough, after hours, this squeeze happened. And usually I talk about this squeeze because it's really important. The psychology behind this squeeze. It's it's when short sellers are stubborn and they're holding it throughout the whole day, right? Holding it through all these spikes, probably adding into it. And then after hours, overnight commissions for those shares, a lot of these brokers are extremely high. Trade zeros, um, overnight fees are just ridiculous. Um, Centerpoint. So there's a lot of brokers out there that they do have shares available for this one, but they're just extremely high, and they just can't hold it overnight because they can't afford it. So then they take a loss, it squeezes, and just keeps squeezing higher due to that. This particular day was also really choppy. If you didn't catch this move as soon as pre-market open, then you missed the move, right? Because as soon as market open, you can see it was really choppy. Um, but I think the valuable lesson here is always make sure you cover your filing side of your research, right? Because technicals only indicate so much. You want to know what's actually driving this stock. So go into your filings, check and see the shares outstanding. I also didn't like this shares outstanding. It's a little bit too high for me. I typically like to have a really nice share outstanding of 10 million and under. That way I know a lot of people, a lot of short sellers can't really locate shares, right? Because most of the brokers, if it's a micro float or a really tiny float, they don't have the proper broker, or they didn't locate shares in time. So a lot of the times I'll locate shares as soon as pre-market open, as soon as I can. That way I know that I have my shares and they're reserved for me, instead of waiting for the last minute and reserving those shares where it's not guaranteed that the broker might have them. Because as it gets a little bit more interesting, more and more people are going to want to short it, and then the shares are going to be gone. There's only a limited amount of shares when you're shorting. So for that reason alone, so there's a lot of couple red flags on this one. So the shares are standing a little bit high, which it becomes pretty crowded. Even new traders that are just starting to short, they're in this, right? Pretty crowded. So a crowded volume is going to lead into a choppy chart. Another red flag is that as soon as it hit the $2.90 area, where the supply should it came in, which it did, but it's just volume overwhelmed the warrants. Okay, so for this particular video, the volume won on against the warrants. A lot of the times, and I can show you one that was extremely bad. VLRX, I think. Uh, what was it? Give me a second. Yeah. So for VLRX, for this particular ticker here, you can see there was really high dilution, and they announced some positive data, I believe, positive 2 data. Not, don't quite remember. Um, and in pre-market started getting some really nice action. It actually went up 50 to 60%, and it started getting really heavy in this area, and this was after a reverse stock split as well. So it was a very unusual one, even though I went long in this particular area because of a reverse stock split. It was only up 50%. And what else? In positive phase 2 data, a lot of the times we see a really nice push to 100%, 150% before it starts dropping. And I knew that there was some dilution, but I thought it was going to push a little bit higher before actually dumping. But in this scenario, they really didn't care, and I kind of wish that dilution would have just waited um, and pushed this a little bit higher to be a more of a sweeter short. But in this scenario, as soon as market open, it flushed, and you can see this is my 5 minute time frame, and you can see no recovery whatsoever for days. Um, this was with good news. As soon as market open, dilution came in. Second day, another new low. Third day, another new low, and you can see that now it's actually stabilizing. So there, I basically show. Well, I teach a few of you guys. Don't really teach anymore, but I show you guys on voice chat, and on some videos that when to know when dilution is over, right? And you can typically see it on price action. So this is high dilution, right? And typically you don't want to touch it a second day because it may lead to a spike and drop lower, or it may continue to fade. Second day is high risk in my opinion. If I don't touch it the first day, I'm definitely not going to touch it the second day. So high dilution, and then when you know it's stabilizing, that's when the dilution is over for now. Okay, dilution is over, and you can see that it double bottomed in this area. Most likely, it's going to consolidate, and until you never know until um, more more people pick it up in this double bottom to be a technical breakout, or maybe another good news pops up for this particular company. But overall, you can see that it's just been declining for a really long time, and this is how they do it. But this one, it was a really unusual one because they had a reverse stock split um, right here, okay, on this date on the 20th, and on the 22nd they announced the news. And just 2 weeks ago, we've been seeing back-to-back reverse stock split stocks just pop up and go, 100%, 200. I think our what was it that shipper RBZ went up like 600%. So I was thinking, you know what, maybe it's gonna follow suit. But when I saw in pre-market that it wasn't acting like the other ones, I just kind of avoided that. But that concludes the whole video. I just kind of want to show you guys how volume takes over high dilution any day if it's there, right? As soon as it starts rotating that many shares, and you guys can see it was 10.3 million, and as soon as it rotates that, I'm not gonna touch it short. It's just very high risk because now that the volume took over all these warrants, there is no dilution in the stock, and it can squeeze. As you guys can see, it squeezed and it just kept squeezing even after hours. So it's a really, really good example. And I think this one, it's going to give us another possible entry, but I want to see it test $3. And people are even asking me, "Hey Ivan, are you gonna short it today?" Which it was on Friday, because it was popping up on scanners, and you can see a nice little gap up. And I was like, "No, I'm not gonna touch this." This, you guys can see. Look, you guys can see the type of move it puts out. Look, this is the first day it rallied, right? Same setup, exact same setup. It starts spiking in volume. Okay, first spike pulls back, second spike pushes harder. Okay, first spike pulls back, second spike pushes harder. So you guys have to learn from the past. What does this stock, what has it been doing? And most of the time it has a second day run. So I want to see if it can actually push and test the $3 area. The $3 area has a really nice accumulation area to where it could be a resistance and then reject it. But I'm most likely not gonna touch it just because it has a really, really big amount of shares outstanding. So after the warrants that have been exercised, it was at 22 before the warrants were unlocked. So now it's at 32 million, somewhere around there. So 32 shares outstanding, and it's just too big for me. It's not worth it. One that I am looking at, and I really didn't want to do this. This is was supposed to be a short video, but the main one that I'm looking at, it's Roku. First, some downside. You can see it had some massive runs when they beat earnings, and they just kept pushing higher. They did an offering on the 16 right here. On the 16, they raised some money due to funds, but it still continued to push. It still continued to push very strong. People really believe in that. I think The last upgrade that they did was at $110. That was the last upgrade, I believe. $110. So we'll see if it reaches $100 around that area, but you can see it's such a massive squeeze. Definitely looking to short this one for maybe a week or so and get have some downside, at least to $80, somewhere around here, somewhere around this area. Um, and that is it. If you guys have any questions, I am going to post the link below this video for the chat room. It's completely free. I'm there every single day. You guys can ask me questions or via Facebook, Instagram, whatever you guys like. I'm here to help. So, hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.